Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. Pelleting technology became available in the 1930s and now is used in the manufacturing of nearly all commercial broiler feeds. When it comes to pelleting, what's too little and what's too much when it comes to poultry nutrition? Here with us today to discuss just that, is Dr. John Boney of Penn State University. Welcome, John. Thank you for being here with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me and thanks for the opportunity.
For those of you that are tuning in here today, we thank you for being with us. And if you have any questions, please post those there in the chat area on your screen. If you're joining us from social media, you can post those in your social channel. So now, John, a few weeks back, you were at the Poultry Science Association annual meeting and you were talking about pelleting and poultry nutrition. Now, for a long time, the focus has really been on energy savings when you look at, pellets and poultry. But broiler performance is just as important, is it not?
Yeah, it sure is. And yes, there is value in simply pelleting feed. Regardless of that form, you get some benefit from running it through the conditioner and forming it into a pellet. But a lot of recent research and things through history have shown us that there's also benefits to broiler performance if you put the resources into enhancing that pellet quality.
So, how important then is it to the ratio of pellets to fines when you look at broiler performance? What is too little and what is too much?
Yeah, that's been a focus of the research out of my lab here at Penn State. We've had great collaboration from the industry here, from those at commercial feed mills to those within integrated operations, giving us access to the feed mill itself, where we can get in and control how that feed is being manufactured, so we can control the outcome of the physical quality of the pellets, to those integrators that allow us access to their chicken and turkey houses, where we can collect feed samples and from those feed pans and look at the percentage of pellets, the percentage of fines, and really try to gauge and understand how that can impact things like broiler performance, flock uniformity, and overall profitability of an operation.
What about the quality of a pellet? Does that have much influence on the nutritive value for the bird?
Yeah, this is probably one of the more exciting findings from the research that we've conducted through several experiments. I want to preface this with saying we studied feed quality, feed flow from the feed mill to chicken barns, throughout those feed pans, both in an instance, a single instance in time, as well as looking at it throughout a particular feeding phase over time. And what we found is yes, we can influence the performance of birds in the chicken houses. We can influence the profitability of an operation based on a few things. It's the quality of feed, the percentage of pellets in the feed pan, as well as the length of the feed line. And the length of the house doesn't change, but where you place the feed bin can certainly be decided by that producer. And what we found, if you can get producers to place feed bins more centrally located, where the feed's entering in the center of the barn and being augured to either end, in making the time spent in an auger less. In that instance, we can maintain the quality of feed that the guys in the feed mill have worked so hard to produce. And when we can maintain that physical quality of the feed, i.e. more pellets, less fines in a feed pan, what we're finding is a more uniform distribution of nutrients. And specifically, we studied pellets and fines from feed samples from within chicken houses. And we found that the pellet is quite uniform in nature. The nutrient density, regardless of where you're grabbing that sample, tends to stay the same. However, the fines that are produced from just the milling process or the breakdown of those pellets into fines has a great deal of nutrient variability. And that nutrient variability certainly is what is influencing the uniformity of the flock and how well those birds perform or don't.
So you mentioned where how the auger as a system is set up. So the longer the feed is in the auger, the more the pellets become ground, so to speak, or where do you see that? Or is there like a length where you're recommending that, don't go over this because you're going to lose quality and it's going to affect the nutrition of those birds?
A specific length, we haven't got that far down the road yet. This is certainly still a work in progress. But what we found is, if you take a standard, at least in Pennsylvania, a 500-foot long chicken house, you either have a 500-foot long feed line where the feed bin is at the end of the house, or you could have a 250-foot long feed line if it is more centrally located. So in those instances, what we're able to see through our research. We try to take replicated samples. We do this from very specific feed pans over time. We're finding that yes, you can influence the nutrient distribution and or the nutrient density in those particular feed pans, which becomes important. Chickens have legs and wings and the ability to move around, but we know that broiler chickens, they've been bred for their appetite, selected for their appetite. They like to find feed, find water, and spend their time in between those two sources. So there's not a lot of movement along the length of a barn, which is where the presentation in these particular feed pans become important to the animal and how they perform.
So are birds like we are? We always go back to kind of that same place at the table, the same seat on the train, that kind of thing. Do they go back to the same place in the feeding area, or can it vary around the barn?
There's some research out of Europe that studied just that. And as one might expect, as those animals age, they do stop moving around a whole lot. So early on in life, yes, there's more free movement within the house. And then in some cases, like here in the US and in the summer right now, there are a lot of migration fences up to keep animals in certain spots of the house. So they're limited by the system design as well.
You mentioned the quality of the pellets and how that can influence live weight gain. What about other factors at play as well then?
Um, the nutrient density and the fact that those pellets remain quite uniform in nature in regards to nutrition and nutrient density. If you're able to feed that bird something consistently without much fluctuation or variation in that nutrient density, uh, you're going to give them an opportunity to reach their genetic potential more so. The other thing we found in our research is we're seeing, um, as for folks that have spent time in chicken houses, we're seeing more fines in the front of the house. And by front of the house, I mean closest to the hopper, closest to where the feed is dropping into that auger. We're seeing more fines at the front of the house, more pellets at the end of the house, which makes sense when we think of how the pellets continue to break down, and those fines can essentially sift down through uh, the pellets. The fines are smaller in size, and they can sift down through. So it's obvious that we would have more pellets at the end of the house. Um, what our research has suggested is if you can start with a higher percentage of pellets at the mill or a more durable pellet at the mill, you have less of that pellet breakdown, which is where you have a better opportunity to have more nutrient uniformity or nutrient density uniformity throughout the house.
What about genetics of the birds? Does that have any influence or any relationship, I should say, with pellet quality? And do you have to link that up at all, or does that make any difference?
I think the literature is full of folks that have studied how feed form influences different genetic strains differently. I think it's fair to say that all of them respond better to more pellets, less fines. So there is a genetic component where if you're studying one strain versus the other, you might see more benefit. I haven't done that work necessarily. Uh, it would be interesting to do that work, but I haven't done that myself. But we can assume that both, or how many ever strains you're comparing in a study, uh, would have a positive, you'd be positively influenced by more pellets.
Any recommendations for how a feed mill can improve the quality of the pelleted feed that they're manufacturing and putting out there for the broiler industry?
There are a lot of suggestions, but what I always tell folks is, what is too much in regards to nutrition? That was one of the questions that was asked here in the beginning. If your sole goal or objective is to increase pellet durability index, we can do that. The literature has a lot of different examples. We can change the steam conditioning temperature and steam conditioning time. We can study the moisture content of our mash feed and try to influence that in some way. There are pellet binders. We can look at the thickness of the pellet die. There are just so many strategies, but what is important is to know that each of those strategies come with some form of a limitation, and that you need to make these changes. And as you're making changes, follow the feed from the mill to the chicken house to the processing plant. And the ultimate goal is to provide pellets, or provide feed with enhanced pellet quality, um, but do so in a way that is improving the performance of the birds and improving the yields that you're seeing in the processing plant. And I guess the point of this is, if we just decided to increase the steam conditioning temperature by 20 degrees Fahrenheit, sure, we may be able to increase pellet quality, but what happens to the heat liable nutrients?
Mhm.
Are we going to have some conformational changes that's going to lead to a reduction in amino acid digestibility, which, yeah, you sent more pellets to the chicken house, but did you really improve performance? So it's kind of it's kind of delicate, and it takes um, effort from folks in the mill to folks on live production side and folks in the processing plant to really uh, make changes that will, at the end of the day, improve the profitability of the operation.
So then how best for a feed mill to go about creating a strategic plan to monitor pellet quality, or to establish what is the best pellet quality for, a broiler house? And when we look at it, because of course we want to look at broiler performance, we want to look at return for the overall return for the customer. How should a mill go about that, or a broiler company, because a lot of them manufacture their own feed? How do they go about taking and figuring out what is the best plan for me?
Well, I want to make sure folks realize I operate in reality. I know that sometimes the goal for the day is just to get all the birds we have fed, and get enough feed to all the farms. And so in some cases, that is the goal. In other cases where you may have um, the room in the mill, a little bit of wiggle room, so that maybe that isn't your sole objective. There's some opportunity here. And I think what it would take is, leadership that is supportive of this. And it's going to take uh, human resources, people, to make sure that this happens. You're going to have to come up with a feed milling plan. You're going to have to come up with a feed sampling plan and a quality control or a feed analysis plan to really start to gather the data that is needed to understand, all right, this is the feed that we're producing at the mill. This is what it actually translates to, as in, the percentage of pellets and fines in feed pans in chicken houses, to the overall uniformity of the flock and the breast meat yield of that flock. So it's going to take human resources. Um, the strategy may include looking at the feed mill. Is there an opportunity to invest in, additional pelleting lines, or change one component of manufacturing that allows you to increase pellet durability index by 10%? And then follow that feed through and monitor the profitability. So there's no quick fix. This certainly has to be a decision made at the leadership level, and then empower your people to collect those samples, gather the data, and then make the decisions that will increase profits for your operation.
Yeah, good point. So, key takeaways. What do you want to leave our audience with here today?
Um, what I really like about this research that we've done, this area of research, we've offered two solutions. One for folks in the feed mill, as well as a solution for producers. And it's not often that your research will provide answers to both groups, because at the chicken house level, in an integrated operation, they're receiving the feed that the mill made them. And that's the reality, and we appreciate that. But they have some discretion on where the feed bin could be placed, and if we can place it centrally so that uh, we're allowing the feed to spend less time going through an auger through a feed line, that's certainly a way to maintain the quality of the feed that is sent from the feed mill. And alternatively, if we look, in the feed mill, there are many strategies, many options to improve the physical quality of feed, um, knowing that in doing so, you can increase the uniformity of the feed and of the nutrients in the chicken house. And in both instances, you have an opportunity to allow allow that flock to perform at its genetic potential. And I think that's the ultimate goal of the research that we've been doing.
What's your next step? What's your next research? You have more in this project that you're looking at?
Yeah, there's two directions we can go. The first is understanding what happens in the starter phases with crumbled feeds, and that's where I have a student coming in here in August, which is just in a couple days. But we're going to really focus on the starter phase, because to date we've really just focused on grower phases and forward, when animals are provided pelleted feed. So we want to see what happens there and see how that can influence some of the results. And then the other thing is to look at some of the feed additives and see how feed additive uh, delivery to the feed pans changes based on feed quality, and see if that can
Mhm.
influence the uniformity of the flock.
Very interesting. Well, John, thank you so much for joining us here today and sharing this update and this insight. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Likewise, we appreciate all of you tuning in and taking a few minutes of your time to spend with us here today. Until next time for Feedstuffs, I'm Sarah Muirhead.